Well, good morning. He plays. It's been a minute. I don't know about the rest of the world. I see the open conflict. I see people choosing sides. I'm not really here to talk about that. What I am here to take a look at and hopefully encourage some others to take a look at is 1 Samuel, right? Chapter 13, verse 14 refers to King David as a man after God's own heart. Well, what does it mean to have a heart that's after God's own heart? And this is important because we all need to really look within ourselves. And this is going to meander a little bit, but this is important. I'm going to start out by saying Naomi suffered an injury, and I don't see it as random or an accident. I see it as an organized demonic attack that worked to a certain extent because now I'm using resources I don't have and time I don't have to protect and defend and heal my beloved dog. And one of the things I did was take her to my local pet, not so intelligent shop. And I'm not dissing people who work there. I have a plan through them, and I use it to the extent that I can. One of the things that happened while we were there, is a young girl, woman, whatever, came in with her little dog, and they're all happy and bouncy, and she just mentions that she's there for a Bordetella vaccine, and she has to get it because, she needs to take her dog to a kennel or a doggy daycare, and they won't allow it unless the dog gets the Bordetella vaccine. Okay, fair. So that's what she's there to do. And I mentioned to her, I said, well, because she said, well, my dog doesn't like shots. And I said, well, it's not actually a shot. It's a vaccination that I said, you can buy it at Tractor Supply, and it looks like it's a shot because it's got a needle, and you use saline to add to the actual vaccine, and that's how you reconstitute it, and then you draw it up in a syringe. I said, but you don't give the dog a shot. You unscrew the cap, you take the needle off, right? You unscrew the needle, and then you screw on this little tiny cone, so you can squirt this up the dog's nose. I said, it's really easy. You can do it yourself. And I was just correcting that. And shortly later, because Naomi and I were now leaving, she's all bouncy, happy, leaving with her dog, and I said, hey, have a nice day or something, and she was like, thank you so much. I said, what do you mean? She said, I'm going to Tractor Supply. I said, why? She said, well, Pet, not intelligent, wanted to charge me $90 for that vaccine. 90. And you get it at Tractor Supply here. I'm not going to tell you where here is because they'll probably up their prices here. But right now you can get it for $15. I know for a fact in the greater metro DC area, it'll cost you about $100 from Tractor Supply. So, number one, what does it mean to have a heart like David did after God's heart? And what does it mean for the rest of us in our lives? Because this young woman has a puppy that's like 7 months old, and I assume she's in her early 20s, and she's just starting out. She's driving a 20-year-old Honda. Do you honestly think she has $90 to spare? She's trying to do the right thing because she's been brought up into a Babylonian world system, which we are all in, and we're all co-opted by it, and none of us has a heart after God's own heart, or we wouldn't stand for that kind of blatant evil. And it is blatantly evil to overcharge someone by that much so their dog can go to daycare and get charged $30 a day to run around for 8.5 minutes. So the system is evil. What we just recently experienced, to hear some tell it, is a majority of Americans woke up to a point where they realized our political system is evil, yada, 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 and they supposedly now we have, the candidate won the electoral college and also won the popular vote. Okay. And now everybody's going to rely on, Batman, so to speak, to go in and root out evil, or his DC Comics team, however you want to look at it, of superheroes. So with that experience at the Pet Not Intelligent, I had to separate from that, I had to do something where my vehicle's not big enough, and so I ended up at a U-Haul, and he was telling me how U-Haul, the guy that was working there was telling me how U-Haul works, yada, yada, yada. I'm not going to go over all that, but one of the things he told me was it's a self-contained system, U-Haul is. They never sell their trailers or trucks. They rebuild them constantly. They'll rent them, they'll lease them, but they never do they sell them, like Hertz sells cars, right? After they've no, they rebuild them, they recondition them, they use them over and over again. They build them stoutly. That's why those trailers are, you can't buy a trailer like that at Lowe's. You're going to get a much more inferior trailer at Lowe's, which is why decades ago I decided whenever I need a trailer, I just rent one at U-Haul, because you won't get a decent trailer at Lowe's like a U-Haul trailer. You won't. Go check them out. See what they're made of. You won't. And I purchased at one point I purchased a recreational vehicle, and they're not built as well as what U-Haul does either. And there's a reason for that, right? Because it's all part of the Babylonian World System. You could say, well, isn't U-Haul part of that Babylonian World System? Well, I'm not here to make a moral judgment one way or another, but I am telling you they got smart enough to, it's a family-run business to this day. As much as possible, they're in the world, but not of it. And you can see the quality of their products. I personally wouldn't rent a closet from U-Haul. That's what you're doing is, you rent a storage shed. You're basically renting a closet. Like, go build your own storage shed or go purchase one. But that is just to show you how we have been programmed to think. Okay? And it's in the churches too. Sorry, this thing I don't know, it dims occasionally, and I don't have the money to buy something that doesn't dim. So there's that. So he also mentioned to me that somebody was giving him financial advice, and there was a guy that was working at U-Haul who's actually, I guess you could call him a trust fund baby, right? And he doesn't get to touch his money till he's 30, and his parents were like, but you have to get a job doing something. And so he's like, okay, fine. The terms of the contract are that I have to work, so I'll work at U-Haul, which is really low pressure when you think about it. But he's really intelligent too, because he's like, one of the things he gives people, the coworkers, like financial advice, and it's very reasonable advice when you hear it if you have been brought up to be a wage slave, to work for a set hour or even for a salary. Like the way he said this was incredible. He says, okay, you get a job as an assistant manager at U-Haul, and you negotiate your salary. What you're basically saying is no matter how much profit U-Haul makes that year, they only have to pay you X amount. Okay? Well, that's how you know you're a wage slave. There it is. You don't get to profit from their profitability. Okay? Same thing if you're an hourly wage earner. Yeah, you can work overtime, but you're only going to get X amount because you can only work so many hours in a week before you're physically exhausted. So you don't get to benefit from the profitability of whatever organization that is. Okay, so that is the Babylonian world system. And you say, oh, but the church is not that. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Any church, any religious organization. Oh, we're in the world but not of it. Oh, really? Why do we pay bills? Why do they need our 10% to keep the lights on? It's not miraculous. You know, the faith preachers will tell you, oh, you give and it's a miracle. It's a miracle for them. They're set up in a Babylonian world system that gives them a business entity that's tax-free. Okay? And you donate money to that. Now, before I had to learn the hard way, I donated to a like-minded individual in the middle of COVID who was correct in his thinking about what we were going through, and I'm not getting into that. I'm just saying I donated a big, huge chunk of money in a couple of big lump sums. And what I found was that as soon as this it was a little tiny church in a little tiny town where nobody's ever heard of it before, as soon as they became prosperous, they just became part of the Babylonian world system. Not because they're evil, but because that's what they're in. And so they just did what people do. And that's how we all are. But David, in 1 Samuel 13, chapter 13, verse 14, David stands out as a man after God's own heart. We just breeze by this. Why did he stand out? Because he wasn't part of the Babylonian world system. He wasn't part of, okay, within this system, the guy at U-Haul tells me another thing, oh, I found a way to buy a house for $6,000 in Michigan, and now I'm renting it out, and you're still in the world system. Okay? So when your faith preacher says, oh, you didn't donate your money in faith and that's why God isn't kind to you. I mean, really? Because Joseph was in prison for a long, long time. Oh, you made a wrong move. You told the wrong people. Really? You think you've got it down? You think that after your 20, 30 years of Bible study, you've really got it down and you know God? Well, David was 14, and 1 Samuel says that David had a heart after God's own heart. And what did David do? What did David do? He killed, he murdered the evil one. Specifically, in this case, it was Goliath, right? Not only did he kill him, he severed his head from the rest of his body, because Goliath practiced a religion where they believed that if when you died, your body had to be whole or you wouldn't go to their heaven. So David, not only did he kill him, he severed his head to make sure he wasn't going to be in this life or the next one. And he had 4 other stones to kill Goliath's 4 brothers, right? Now that's a man after God's own heart. You could say, oh, old covenant, new covenant, God doesn't do that stuff anymore. Really? Because Ananias and Sapphira dropped dead in church for lying about the money they donated to the church. And that is New Testament, brothers and sisters. That is Brit Hadashah. So maybe we're too co-opted by this world system. I go to camp. I was invited by some very close friends to go camping. And one of my friends has to go to the owner of the campground who's wanting to take advantage of me financially, who's a Christian. They're all Christians. And she has to say, no, you're not going to take advantage of him that way. You're going to charge him a reasonable rate. That is the Babylonian system that we are all co-opted by. And these are all these people I've mentioned to you are born-again Christians, meaning they're spirit-filled believers, right? In other words, they're supposedly led by the Spirit of God. The indwelling Spirit of the Most High God apparently doesn't have an issue, if I am to believe these folks, with overcharging a fellow believer. And I would say to you that that is absolutely evil as God defines it. Because what got us all into this current pickle that we're all in is, number one, not discerning the true will of God in the little things, because we think the little things don't matter. And the Bible clearly says line upon line, precept upon precept is how you build your foundation of belief and obedience. Here a little, there a little. So if that's how you do it for morality, it makes perfect sense that that's how you do it for immorality too. And your idea of immorality is don't cuss, don't watch porn, don't commit adultery, but all these other things are okay because you participate in it too. You get a retirement. You work for money. And it co-ops you. That's not what happened to the disciples. By the way, I think almost every one of them, right? Except for John the Revelator and Judas. They were martyred. And all the Christian zealots were martyred. Stephen was martyred. He was a waiter. He was a table waiter. So I will put it to you, all of you who think you're doing the right thing by whatever your weekly service is, and how insular you are and all of the rest of it, whether you're in that little church down south and you started kicking people out because you disagreed, they made you feel uncomfortable is what they did. And rather than looking within, you say, well, I feel uncomfortable. I'm just going to project onto this person. They're clearly trying to hurt me. Okay. So I feel like all that money was a complete waste. And I would have been better off to pay the mortgage down on my house or pay off a car. Okay. So I can have freedom to have a heart after God's own heart and do what I'm supposed to do, be led by the Spirit. The Babylonian World System is what we're all stuck in and what we're all a part of. Not only did David kill Goliath, he killed, what does it say? Saul has killed his thousands and David has killed his 10,000. Killing apparently isn't wrong to God. You say, oh, but it says thou shalt not kill. I think it says thou shalt not murder, but let's just argue that for a minute. Is killing not killing if you sanitize it to the point where you don't even know you're doing it and call it a medical procedure? Is killing not killing if you use something that God designed for procreation and said this is a good thing in this context when you've made a covenant with this other? When a man and a woman, let's be clear because there's so much confusion, when a man and a woman make a covenant, but outside of that, it's not okay no matter what. And you can find a pastor, many of them, who will tell you, you have a good justifiable reason for, right? David was a man after God's own heart. If we are truly people after God's own heart, it's a good start that somehow the numbers are truer and the right guy came into office and it looks like the right people are going to be able to challenge things we all know are wrong. Okay. Here's a little basic thing. I went shopping. I bought something I shouldn't eat, but I wanted to. And I know how to, control it with medication. But one of the ingredients was a bioengineered, it just says bioengineered food ingredient. And part of me is like, oh, okay, so what, right? Okay, so I ate one of these things. Oh, it was horrible, the reaction my body had. And at first I was like, I'm looking on this list, because when I bake banana bread, it's wheat flour and a tiny little bit of water and bananas and some salt and some yeast. And sometimes I throw in raisins or walnuts. And it tastes good. And, sugar and butter. Okay? And it tastes good. People like it. And I enjoy baking it. There's like 40 ingredients in this donut, right? And I don't know what they are. It says softener, emulsifier, I don't know what the purpose of that stuff is, because I know what the words mean, but I also know that I bake banana bread and I don't need to do all that. And the consistencies seem the same to me. And this donut smelled good, but it didn't have, I think it was a blueberry donut. It was some kind of fruit donut. there were no blueberries in the donut. There was blueberry flavoring, and but it was a chemical. I ate it, and I'm like, oh no, this is a chemical, like, like almost. And the seed oils are, in fact, they've been so. Forgive me for saying it like this. They've been bastardized into something that your body can't process, and your liver sees it as a poison. Okay, so that's all for profit. Yet, if you're a baker, you're like, well, I'm a Christian. I'm covered by the blood and my faith. God hasn't said to me, Robert, you've got a heart after me. I love you. He has said I love you, but he hasn't said you're doing what I want you to do or you've got a heart. And so these people that stand out, they were put in the Bible for a reason, and the things they did were put there for a reason. Okay? And the reason is to show you, I don't care how many decades you've been at this. I don't care how many degrees, how many letters you have behind your name. I don't care how many people think you're wonderful. I don't care that your family thinks you're a good person. I don't care. Okay? What I see is the system is the same system. And we're all co-opted by it. And unless and until we truly decide that we've had enough, and we seek the Lord not for him to do a miracle, because no, we made the system, we participate in the system, and we can change the system. Maybe he's just waiting on us to do that. David didn't ask anybody's permission. He just did what he felt was right. Can you imagine that today? Oh, murder is wrong. Oh, no, we need to have a conference. We need to meet with Goliath and his men, and we need to have a 3-day conference, and we need to see if we can show him the love of the Lord Adonai. That's what we would do. I'm just as convicted as anyone else. I don't think you get a pass. I don't think any of us deserves a pass. And I think the spiritual warfare is real. And I think that churches, the fact that religious organizations don't talk about it, don't see the tactics. My dog, this wasn't as a result of an ice storm, which people will assume. It's the result of I gave her a bath, and walking down the aisle, something literally grabbed her. Something evil grabbed her and wrenched her leg. And this has happened before. And you can say, oh, you're crazy, she just slipped. No, she didn't. If I had walked down another aisle, nothing happens. Like, the demons are real. We don't, for the most part, know how to fight them. We don't take it seriously. We're too comfortable in our little rituals, and we're no different than the rest of the heathen in the world, and we're certainly not any different from the Jews. So I would really like people to just take a look at that and look within, and hopefully this percolates to where you strive to go deeper. Because I think that's what the Lord is counting on us to do. That's what we have to do. So with that, I leave you with go in peace. Shabbat Shalom. It was actually yesterday, but I think it's okay to say it anyway. Peace of God.